So you just filed your taxes and you're ready to move on to not thinking about Uncle Sam for another year. And then a week later, you get a tax form. Or maybe you look back at last year's taxes and realize that you made a mistake. Well, what do? Well, it's easy. You file what's called an amendment. Basically, you file a correction to your taxes on Form 1040X. Once you file a 1040X, it becomes your new tax return for that year. It essentially changes your original return to include new or correct information. To complete a 1040X, you need a few items, such as the 1040X, obviously, a copy of your return that you're correcting, supporting documents, and maybe any notices from the IRS, etc. If you're amending years 2019 or earlier, you can use the current revision of the 1040X. If you're filing a revision for tax year 2018 or earlier, you would use a prior form and instructions from January of 2020. The IRS charges interest and penalties on taxes that were not paid by the due date. Generally, that's going to be April 15th of every year. A big misconception is that if you file an extension, you get more time to pay, and that couldn't be further from the truth. You still need to pay your tax bill by the deadline, but you can file an extension to give yourself more time to put your tax return together. So now in this example, we'll go over the lines to hopefully shed light on how to fill out a 1040X. So the first thing you do is you would enter the year that you're trying to amend. If it's a fiscal year or a calendar year, you would enter them where they need to be. So you would also enter obviously your name, your last name, your social security number. If it's a joint return, obviously you would enter your spouse's information. You would enter obviously your address, your phone number, etc. Now you must check one of the boxes on your filing status even if you aren't changing the status. So in this case, we're not changing the status. We were single in our original return. We're gonna go ahead and click single in this return. The first section is going to be income and deduction. So this is going to be adjusted gross income. So in our case, we had $40,000 of adjusted gross income, and we received another W-2 from a part-time job for $1,500. In this specific case, we had $1,500 of income, and they actually did withhold $75 of taxes, and we'll get to that in a little bit. The correct amount that should have been in our adjusted gross income was $41,500. Again, that's $40,000 of what we originally claimed, plus the additional $1,500 for the W-2 that we forgot or we didn't get until after we filed our taxes, which means the correct amount should be $41,500. We use standard deduction in our first one, and we're going to use standard deduction in our second one. So there's no change. Note that we had $12,400 as the standard deduction on our 2020 filing. Now we only have $0. The correct amount should have been $12,400. So now we're going to subtract lines 2 from 1. And in our original case, it was $27,600. Now it's going to be $31,500. So we didn't have any qualified business income, but if you did have those adjustments, you would enter them on 4B, and 4A is going to be reserved for probably a future rendition. So we'll go ahead and skip that for now. So now we move on to line 5, which is going to be taxable income. In our original case, it was $27,600, and now it's going to be $29,100 with our additional $1,500 that we earned. So now we'll move down to tax liability. In our original filings, our taxes were $3,116 based off taxable income of $27,600. However, we have an additional $180 because we made another $1,500 in income. So our total taxable liability should have been $3,296. We didn't have any changes to non-refundable credits, so now we're going to subtract line 7 from 6. So we're still going to get to tax liability of $3,116, our new value of $3,296. We didn't have any other taxes, that could be self-employment tax, etc. We didn't have any of that in this case. So our total tax should have been $3,296. However, we previously claimed $3,116. So now we'll move down to the payment section. So in our case, our original withholdings were $5,000. However, on our new W-2, we had an additional $75. So our total withholdings for that year was actually $5,075. So we didn't have any changes again to any estimated payments, any earned income credit. If you did have changes to those, just make sure you enter the original amount plus the change and then adding the correct amount in column C. So the total payments is obviously going to be anything from lines 12 down to 15. And in our case, we didn't have any of those. So our total payments to the IRS was $5,075. Now we get down to the important section as it relates to your pocketbook. Line 18 would include any overpayment or refund that we reported on our original return. In our original return, we reported $1,884 as a refund. Now we're going on line 19, we're going to subtract line 18 from 17, and that's going to be $3,191. So this is the amount that you actually gave the IRS. However, when you compare that to our actual tax liability of $3,296, we would have to subtract that $3,296 from $3,191. That would get you $105 of what you owe. If this amount on line 19 would have been greater than your total tax, you would have gotten a refund. And if that's the case, you would have entered that amount on line 21. This is the amount that is overpaid on this return. Now on line 22, you can actually have that amount refunded to you on this return if you'd like, or you can have it applied to another year. You would just enter the year and then your estimated tax from that year on line 23. Part 1 relates to dependents. So now in this case, is if there was any changes to dependents, you would obviously have to, if you started out with one dependent and you're changing them to 2, etc., you would have to actually enter that information here. Regardless of what you do, you need to list all your dependents and children that were claimed on this return in this section. Now in part 2, if you'd like to donate to the election fund, you can do that here in part 2. The most important section in this return, in my opinion, is going to be in part 3. Here you're going to explain why you are filing this amendment. It could be that you received another W-2, maybe you forgot certain credits, or for whatever reason, this is where you would explain why you're filing this return. Now you would obviously have to sign and date your return as needed. If you're required or you choose to paper file, you can check page 9 of the instructions to see where to send the amendment. If you filed your taxes on an electronic platform, they usually make this process pretty easy and it will guide you through the steps. So after watching this video, you should be able to review the 1040X to ensure that it's correct and the changes that you're intending to make are reflected in the right area. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you in the next video.